Hey, Safir, very good evening. How are you doing today?
Hey, good evening, Sharmila. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you. Thank you, Safir, for taking time from your busy schedule to give a talk about your career journey on my YouTube channel. It's been a while that we worked together, and finally, I get
Yeah,
to talk to you to know about your career growth.
yeah, it's a pleasure of mine.
Cool. Thank you. So, without any delay, the first question about your career journey would be, since you have been core in the, infrastructure and SRE and all of that. So it's basically around that.
Mhm.
So what kind of inspired you to pursue a career in systems infrastructure and SRE area? And how has your
Mhm.
journey evolved across these various domains over the years that you've been working in the industry?
Yeah, well, I've always had this passion for systems and networks since my early days with computers. So after completing my masters, I decided that the conventional route of application development, that is not for me. So since I neither had the formal training nor the mentorship to take this path, I decided to join a software institute as a trainer. And for the next 1 year, I taught software systems and networking, and I was learning from my seniors, and I was utilizing the whole lab environment to learn anything and everything that I came across. So with this theoretical knowledge in hand, I joined another company as a system and network administrator. And for 2 years, I worked with production systems for clients from across the globe. Now, this period was very foundational for me, and I consider this as my formative years as an engineer. Now, from there, I moved on to an internet scale company where I worked extensively with large scale software infrastructure. I spent the next 7 years managing distributed systems and infrastructure with tens of thousands of servers spread across many data centers. So, after that 7 years, I took up the role of a system architect in a startup where I worked on public cloud platforms, especially AWS.
Okay.
Now, this is where, yeah. So again, one thing about this particular stint is that this is where I also tried my hand at management
Okay.
and handle a sizable team. And this is the only pure management experience that I ever had. Even though I was playing both manager and system architect roles.
Mm-hmm.
So from after this, I again moved on to another internet company where I handled planet scale, Kafka, and traffic infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have noticed that I keep switching between large companies and startups.
Yeah.
So yeah, startups tend to give you more breadth of knowledge in the latest technologies, whereas these large scale internet companies offer very deep knowledge and expertise in time tested and stable technologies. Now, with all this experience, at this point, I felt that I had enough breadth and depth of experience in this domain. So I
Mm-hmm.
decided to venture into freelancing, working with startups on cloud infrastructure. So I did the freelancing for over a year. And this is around the time when I got a full-time opportunity to build SRE for an e-commerce giant.
Okay.
It had huge potential,
Mm-hmm.
but despite the initial promises, there were organizational and priority changes that
Okay.
undermined that potential. So I
Okay.
decided, rather than moving on to another gig, I will take a career break. It has been 18 years in this domain, so I think I earned a break, and that is where I'm right now.
Okay. Okay. I think that's an interesting one, like how you kind of said about, switching between startups and MNCs. And, you've had your learnings in both areas, startup in a different way and then implementing it in MNCs when it's large scale. And, it actually tells you why you also wanted to kind of go ahead and, get into the consulting area. Thanks for that brief intro
Yeah.
about such a large work experience that you've had, right? And so moving on to the next question, since SRE has been your core, right? So, what are some of the basic core principles or best practices that you suggest should anybody building an SRE team? What are the key practices that they need to follow so that they can build that successfully and its deliverables are as expected?
Got it. Yeah, quite a vast topic, but
Huh?
let me start out by saying it's quite a vast topic. But let me start out by saying that reliability and scalability are foundational aspects of a software product that should be integrated from the beginning, rather than added as a feature later on. See, a lot of early stage startups often prioritize rapid prototyping for initial customer engagements, and subsequently that's totally fine. At that point in time, reliability is not a priority probably. But even for startups, subsequent iterations should prioritize reliability as a core requirement during growth, because if you have a fantastic product which is not reliable, even for a startup, your customers are going to walk away, right? So irrespective of whether you're a startup or a large scale company, reliability should be a feature, a core feature to begin with, right? And now that doesn't mean that every product needs to handle a million requests immediately, right? Every business has its size, it is traffic patterns and things like that. What works for Google is not works for your startup, right? So instead, consider that reliability and scalability should evolve over a period of time, and based on your business and your traffic, right? And it's also essential to acknowledge that reliability is a shared responsibility between developers and site reliability engineers, and they complement each other. If you end up creating a silo saying, look, this is totally the part of a service, we don't know, devs don't bother about it, or this is totally devs domain, we don't know, SRE shouldn't bother about it. That silo is a recipe for production outages. So always remember that they complement each other, right? And you asked about principles and best practices, right? And again, quite an extensive topic. But let me try to give some basic points. So the foundation, of course, is about what is your application architecture, right? And prevailing standard or the best practice is to follow a microservice architecture. It should be modular, it should be microservice architecture, right? And when you design the software, you should implement the appropriate software design patterns. Of course, you should not overdo the software design patterns, but your foundation, your core design should implement all the industry standard design pattern. Of course, it's a no-brainer that you should employ effective load balancing strategies depending on what kind of traffic you have, where all your infrastructure is placed, etc. And for any infrastructure that you have, ensure that you have redundancy and failover mechanisms for critical components, especially for your data systems, right? And then there are time-tested scalability patterns such as horizontal scaling, vertical scaling, caching, asynchronous processing, and batch processing. Again, there could be many, but these are kind of the foundational and time-tested patterns. Now, once you have the application and everything ready, you should also make sure it is back-tested using load testing, chaos engineering, performance tuning, etc. And of course, these are all about what you do with the system design and system implementation, right? Now, a system is not complete without the people who build and handle it. So that is where degradation levels and standard operating procedures comes into picture. Degradation levels are those process or backup of what do you say, a backup process that you have where if your primary systems fail, how do you fall back in a manual situation, all right? Manually failing over. The other thing is standard operating procedures for anything. These are the procedures that you put down on paper so that any engineer working on a system, when a system fails, can blindly follow that and recover your systems at the earliest. So SOPs are very important, degradation levels are very important, and all these things put together is what we call business continuity planning, right? BCP. So that is again, there are a lot more to this, but I would say this is the basic list. Now, just to add to that, right? Even with all these things, if you don't have effective observability for your application and infrastructure, none of this is going to matter. Because you need to know what is happening with your systems. You might have designed a fantastic architecture, but any good architecture, even the best of the architecture, will fail at some point. Systems are prone to fail, and that is one core learning for any SRE or any developer, right? Systems will fail. It's a question of when it will fail. So to know that, you should have observability, and observability should be a top priority in your checklist, and it should be part of your system design and your application development itself. I'm hoping this, provides foundational understanding. Again, short answer for a big question, but I hope that suffices.
Sure. Sounds pretty good. Thanks, Safir. I think you kind of summarized it. I do understand that this can be a vast topic in itself where you can talk about it for hours together. But I think a very good catch that you mentioned was about talking about reliability and scalability is going to be a shared responsibility. Only then it will,
Exactly.
only then it will be as effective, and we will see the results instead of saying, "Hey, it's the onus lies on the SRE or just the operations team or just the engineering team." Right? It's everybody coming together.
Right, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
That was a very good call out there, saying it's just not one team. It kind of it's the binding across teams together that expected results. Right? Cool. Thank you so much. The next question here, with the vast experience that you've had, right? So can you maybe talk about two major projects that come to the top of your mind? Either it's been very successful or it's been challenging for you, and then you were able to pull it off. The top, I'm sure you would have a lot of it, but maybe the top two, if you can talk about it.
See, over the past 18 years, right, I have tackled a lot of challenging projects, and it's a bit hard to pick favorites, right? But on top of my mind, there are at least two projects that that kind of differ from the normal SRE projects.
Okay.
The first one is when I was working with Directory, the startup, where we managed an internet voice calling application. Now, this application meant that part of our infrastructure is in public cloud, part of it is in our data centers, and we also had non-conventional networking gear and telecom switches, telecom hardware, and things like that. All of this has to come together for this application to work. Okay. And it gave me a lot of ideas about telecom technologies, telecom protocols, and even the legality and the business setup of mobile virtual network operator. That is what we used to call it, MVNO. So it was quite an interesting project and quite a unique experience. Yeah. The second one at LinkedIn, I was part of the traffic team, which was responsible for all the incoming and outgoing traffic to LinkedIn data centers. And we were responsible for the point of presence infrastructure, which is essentially the entry point to the data centers. And these infrastructure themselves were quite huge. I would say very not comparable with the data centers, but quite big. Now, in addition to this infrastructure that we had placed globally in different locations, we also had a requirement to place more POPs in less secure, more dynamic or unreliable environments, right? And to do that, of course, the conventional way of setting up, mini data center with all the POP, infrastructure was not possible. So what we ended up building was what we call micro POPs. There was an internal term for that other than this, but it's essentially micro POPs with a self-contained set of hardware and software, which you can pick up and drop in any environment, stack it, network it, and you should have a POP running in no time. Quite a unique, project.
Yeah, I think both were unique. The first one kind of you spanned over the entire requirements of a business, right? Like you mentioned, it was private cloud, it was public cloud, it was in data centers, and the way you had to kind of set it up because it would involve telecom. It was also about knowing the legality related legal rules and so on, because it was a telecom setup, right? It's a little outside technical, but I think for the business deliverables, it was important that you kind of had that in mind to set up the architecture or the infrastructure as needed, right? Pretty interesting. I think, there's more beyond the technical stuff that you get to do when you're kind of handling such complicated projects. That's nice. Thanks, Safir. Moving on to the next question, right? With the technology changing almost every other day, right? How do you kind of keep yourself updated, especially in the context of evolving infrastructure paradigms and tools?
See, the thing for all of us, right? We are living in the age of information overload, especially in the domain of infrastructure, cloud, SRE. The development that is happening is too much to track. If you just look at the cloud native computing, organizations landscape of products, it has expanded like anything. It's quite difficult for anybody who even is a veteran of the industry to track all of these things. All right. So there are compromises to be made. The way I treat this is, I look at my knowledge and learning as an inverted pyramid, right? And on top of the pyramid are the topics where I need breadth of my knowledge. It is spread across broad spectrum of topics, ranging from the OS and network, which is the core foundations on one side, and probably AI on the other end of the whole spectrum, and SRE, DevOps, cloud, and every other technology is in between. And as I descend this inverted pyramid, I will have fewer topics, but these are the ones that I specialize in and have a deeper understanding. Now, these topics are mostly tied to my current job role and experience level. So the topics will naturally evolve and change based on career changes. So adapting to the changing needs is very important here, right? And of course, as of how I learn and keep up to date, my primary source of these technologies is curated list of newsletters, content creators that I follow. And besides, whenever I come across a good documentation or an article, I bookmark that. And whenever I get a break from work or any time, I go through those documents, try to read up, because getting a dedicated time for reading these things is quite impossible in the current scenario. Now, one thing to add there, right? Theoretical knowledge is all well and good, but at this level or any level, right? How do you get practical knowledge?
Yeah.
So to be honest, it is not practical, or it's not easy for us to acquire practical knowledge on, or even implement every technology that you want to deep dive into, because it also is tied to your time, what kind of sources you need, and where do you work, and what kind of just the work gives you, right? But what is the next best thing you can do is learn from the experience of others, right? And to do that, of course, again, you can go back to reading other people's experiences, but a better way is by networking, attending conferences, and technical discussions. So these are very important. The reason is that it's not just the content that a person is presenting, it's also about the question that you might have, and more importantly, somebody else in the audience might have. Somebody else might have a different perspective about the same thing that you are hearing, and the questions they ask would give you a better perspective, right? So that's very important. And I do my bit by attending conferences and sometimes running them, speaking in them, running workshops, and things like that.
Okay. That was very well said, Safir. I think the analogy to the inverted pyramid kind of really makes sense as to how you it's important to have knowledge about everything, but you kind of concentrate on what's needed as the core as well, right? I think, like you said, every day you have something new, and it's not possible for you to be on top of everything. So yeah. Perfect. And I think how to set that going also by attending conferences, reading blogs, and all of that stuff. I think that actually shows that's how you keep yourself up to date. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to the next interesting factor of yours, right? You have also been an author recently.
That's right. Yeah.
So please tell us more about it.
See, from the beginning of my career, I was a blogger, and I used to be very consistent in writing. This was the time when Google had the blogger.com platform, and that is where I started off. There was WordPress was another platform. So I would say that was prime time of blogging. Blogging is still quite huge, right? But that is when we started sharing knowledge in in these public platforms, right? So I was very consistent in the beginning. I wrote a lot, and as I progressed in my career, my professional and personal responsibilities grew, and I kind of dropped the ball after some time. Now, I tried to revive the blogging a couple of more times, but it never had the same momentum that I had in the beginning of my career. Now it went on like that for a while, on and off, writing something or not writing something for quite a while. But when I joined LinkedIn, I had a few close colleagues who were writers already. they had already published books, and those were getting good traction. Some of them had multiple books, and this was quite exciting for me, right? Because so far I have only thought about writing small stuff, and of course writing a book, that thought had crossed my mind, but I didn't know how to do it, or how to start. And now I had folks who had done this. I could talk to them, try to figure out what they did, and of course I did they gave me some advice and all, right? And see, the thing with writing a book, right? The most exciting part about that is that it's a different sort of challenge that needs a lot of dedication, planning, and most importantly, investment in one specific domain and going deeper into that. One thing that started happening as I progressed in my career is that this is something I started missing, because I became more of a technology generalist rather than a specialist, right? So I took this as a challenge and chased different publishers with book proposals. Um, there was a lot of rejections. I was shamelessly following up again and again, and it went on for over a year. And ultimately, it was Pact Publishing that finally liked my proposal on a book about serverless technologies, which I was quite passionate about. Right? And I had to learn a lot of new things and deep dive into different serverless technologies, and how these technologies work with cloud vendors in order to write this book. It was originally supposed to be finished in 6 months to 8 months.
Okay.
But it ended up taking 1.5 years to publish the book. But it was worth the effort.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting one, Safir. I think it's not easy to write a book, right? And like what you said, you were a blogger initially, and over a period of time, with various responsibility, both professional and personal, you kind of you were not able to pursue it for various reasons. And how you kind of had to put efforts to actually learn in depth because you're going to write the book. Maybe there could be other factors also that kind of helped you about going ahead and writing this book, right? Maybe if you can talk about that as well, apart from your own studies and time that was required and so on, right? I'm sure it was not an easy one. Maybe you should talk, if you could shed some light on that as well.
Sure. See, I probably made it sound a little easy, except for the time it took, probably, right? But see, it's tough, to be honest, right? You can have all the excitement that you have, but see, you have your day work, right? It's not like you are sitting idle and decide that, okay, I'm going to just write the book and finish it off. Right?
Absolutely.
So you have your 8-hour, 9-hour work day, and then you have to spend time on writing. And when we say writing, it is not just about writing, right? You have to research, you have to try out stuff yourself before your potential readers would try it out, right? So you have to make sure that there is no room for error. You have to do everything well. Then you have to write your first copy. Then you have to proofread it yourself, spell check, all those stuff. Then you send it to your first editor. The editor will send it back. There will be back and forth. Then it goes to your technical editor, comes back and forth, things like that, right? So there's a lot of effort and time involved in this. Just not simply about writing. And despite how passionate you are about a topic, there are certain see, what we call writer's block is real, right? At some point you are going to hit a wall where you don't know, okay, what to write next, and you would just be staring at your computer and sitting there, right? So at the end of the day, it took a lot of time. It takes a bit of toll on your personal time, and how much time you spent on other things and other with other people, right? And it mostly impacts the family, essentially, right? And in that sense, my wife and the family was quite supportive in that sense. And of course, 1.5 year, going on and off. Again, there are ups and downs about writing. Right? Sometimes you will be writing at a good pace, and then it will slow down, all those stuff. So the support was very important, and I had only a few friends who knew about these things, and they were already encouraging and supporting. Right. Now, the other aspect of this whole book writing was that you have to test this out, right? Which means there are a number of technologies that you have to learn. Then you have to implement them in various clouds. Sometimes you have to spend money from your pocket, figure out what kind of infra you have to use. Do sometimes fail many times, and then finally get that sorted out. All right. So that was always there, and the one thing out of all this, there was something that was difficult for me to handle at that time. It took a toll. Basically, was my father was diagnosed with late stage cancer around this time. So, of course, like, I was spending more time with him and, going back and forth from work, going back to him. And there were times when I wrote, chapters or parts of the chapters sitting in the hospital. It was also kind of a distraction, like, de-stressing effort for me. And, I remember, like, there was at least one chapter I mostly wrote while my father was in the ICU and I was in the hospital room waiting. So there was nothing else to do, right? So there were, uh, good times, bad times, everything. But yeah, at the end of the day, when you see that book completed, I would say, like, a lot of the effort that you put in is worth.
Yeah, got it. Thanks, Safir, for getting into such details. Everybody only talks about the nicer stuff, saying how much of work they had to do and how it was, putting effort. But I think the additional part of it, where you gave a personal touch, saying how much of family time it took, I think you really need those supportive friends and family, right? And also talking about your dad's condition, but still that passion in you kind of to do that work, and also talking about it as another way to kind of keep you engaged shows the commitment that you have towards the deliverables. And I think, like you said, it definitely is worth the effort that you put in there, right? And I believe it's beyond what your regular stuff is and gives you a new recognition as well, and find out that you're capable of doing more than what you think you can, or you're already aware, right? Kudos to you for that. That's all. Thank you. So moving on to the next question, Safir. Right. So since you've been switching, between MNCs and startups, and then doing your consulting, and now you're on a break, what's your next move?
Okay. This is a decision I still haven't taken. All right. See, as I mentioned earlier, right, I'm on a career break. After my last stint at Flipkart, probably until June. That's the plan as of now.
Okay.
I'm contemplating whether to go back to full-time employment, and if so, whether to continue in an individual contributor track or move on to management track, since I have done both. At this point, though, I'm favoring going back to consulting as a freelancer and probably set up a consulting firm in the due course. Okay. I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
You take a call. Okay, I think perfect. People shouldn't be who want any great advice from you based on experience. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. They should definitely utilize your experiences and to kind of implement whatever they need, right? So good luck with that. Right?
Thank you.
Final question, Safir. What are your major 2 to 3 tips for anybody who's, beginning their career and can have some lessons learned which they can implement for their growth?
For those starting their careers, right, the first 3-4 years lays the foundation for your entire professional journey. So invest that time in learning, expanding your knowledge, and taking on challenging tasks outside your comfort zone. Now, you might think that you are a beginner, you don't want to do risky assignments or things like that. Don't do that. Be curious. Of course, be cautious, be careful, but go ahead with those uncomfortable tasks or projects that you get. Invest in your learning as much as possible, and use this period also to assess the passion for your chosen field. Sometimes it so happens that after spending a year or a bit of time, you realize that okay, this is not for me. Totally fine. This happens to a lot of people, and then investing this much time into learning this domain actually helps you to make that decision and move on to something else. Right? You can definitely course correct, right? And all this experience adds value to you and shapes you as an engineer. You should not feel that okay, I'm moving from this domain and all is lost. It's not like that, right? Whatever you do, it actually shapes up you as an engineer. You are an engineer at the end of the day, whichever domain you work on. So don't worry about it, right? And more importantly, build relationships, communicate effectively with your colleagues and stakeholders, and network within your industry, not just within your company, but also outside of that. Read extensively, and if possible, consider writing and public speaking opportunity to enhance your skills and visibility. And these early years are really, really critical for your personal as well as professional growth. So please do this as much as possible.
Perfect, Safir. I think those were great, simple takeaways, nothing very difficult to implement. I think you very well emphasized on how it's essential, along with enhancing your technical skills, right? You also need networking and communication skills also play an equally important role, right? I think that's key, which most of them kind of miss that out. But thanks for calling that out explicitly, right? So cool. Great, Safir. It's been great having you on my talk show. I'm sure I have my own learnings from the conversation that we've had. And I am sure the others listening to this also would have something that they will take away and implement in their own career journeys, right? And thanks again so much for taking time to do this. And good luck for the next move.
Thanks, Sharmila, and thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I hope you've had some great takeaways from Safir's career journey. Some of the important factors are about the inverted pyramid analogy that he had, how it's important to invest in early on in your career. Your foundation needs to be strong, and you can do this by reading blogs, attending conferences. He also emphasized on the need for creating relationships in the industry, communication as well, and how it's, whether a role in a startup or MNC does not matter because each one has their own learning experiences. I hope you do implement at least a couple of them from this and do have great outputs because of the same. Please leave your comments and see you in the next episode. Thank you.